has scored more goals than any human being in the history of this sport. He has won everything a footballer can win, on every stage that matters, in front of every crowd that counts. The world knows his face better than it knows the faces of its own neighbors. And yet almost nothing you believe about Cristiano Ronaldo is the real story. Not the arrogance, not the vanity, not the man flexing in front of the mirror that the internet loves to laugh at. That version of him is a costume, a mask the world handed him, and one he learned to wear so we would never see what was underneath. Because long before the private jets and the golden trophies, before he became the most famous athlete alive, there was a thin, hungry boy in a tin-roofed house on a forgotten island in the middle of the Atlantic. A boy whose own teammates mocked the way he spoke. A boy doctors once warned might die if he kept running. This is the story they leave out of the highlight reels, the chapters nobody puts to music, the truth about Cristiano Ronaldo that almost no one ever talks about. Stay with me until the end, because the final part will change the way you see him forever. Funchal, a small town clinging to the green cliffs of Madeira, an island closer to the coast of Africa than to mainland Portugal. This is where it begins. Not in a stadium, in a cramped house with a leaking roof, where rain came through in the winter and the family kept the washing machine on the roof because there was nowhere else to put it. His father, Jose Diniz, was a gardener and a kit man for the local club. His mother, Maria Dolores, cleaned houses and cooked to keep 4 children fed. They had almost nothing. And years later, Maria would confess something she carried in silence for decades, that during a hard, frightening pregnancy, she had considered not having him at all. The greatest goal scorer the game has ever seen came within a breath of never existing. As a boy, Cristiano was obsessed not with fame, but with the ball. He cried when his team lost. He stayed on the street long after the other kids went home for dinner. They nicknamed him the Crybaby because football was never a game to him. It was already everything. When the scouts from Sporting Lisbon saw him, the dream seemed to come true. But the dream had a price. At just 11 years old, he was put on a plane and sent 400 miles across the sea alone to a football academy on the mainland. A child, leaving his mother, his island, his whole world behind. And the mainland was cruel to him. The other boys laughed at his thick Madeiran accent. They couldn't understand him, and they didn't try. He would call home from a payphone and cry so hard he couldn't speak. He once locked himself in a bathroom rather than face the dining hall. He was homesick, lonely, and small. He was, in the eyes of almost everyone around him, a boy who simply wasn't good enough yet to justify the pain. Most children break under that. They go home. He didn't. He decided in a way no 11-year-old should ever have to decide that the loneliness was the rent he would pay, and he would pay it every single day for the rest of his life. Then, at 15, something happened that no amount of training could fix. During matches, his heart began to race, pounding far faster than it should, even when he was barely moving. The diagnosis was a racing heart condition, a fault in the very organ that drove everything he was. Think about the cruelty of that for a moment. A boy who had given up his childhood, his home, his mother's arms, all for football, and now the thing threatening to take it away was beating inside his own chest. The doctors were clear. Untreated, this could end his career. Or, worse, there was a surgery. They went in with a laser and burned away the tiny piece of his heart that was firing too fast, a procedure to silence the part of him that was, quite literally, working against him. He was a teenager lying on an operating table, gambling his life on the chance to keep chasing a ball. And here is the part that tells you everything about who he is. Within days of heart surgery days, he was back in training. Not weeks of rest, not caution. He ran, as if to prove to his own body that nothing, not even his own heart, was allowed to stop him. Most of the world has never heard this story. We remember the goals, the celebrations, the trophies held to the sky. We forget that the man holding them was once a frightened boy who had to be cut open just to be allowed to play. Every sprint he has ever made since carries the echo of a heart that was once told it might fail. By 20, the impossible had happened. Manchester United, the number 7 shirt once worn by legends. He had clawed his way out of poverty and into the brightest spotlight in world football. Everything he had bled for was finally his. And then his father died. Jose Diniz, the gardener, the kit man, the first man to put a football near his son, had spent years lost to alcoholism. As Cristiano's star rose, his father's health collapsed. Liver failure took him at just 52 years old. In 2005, while his son was a young man far from home, chasing the dream they had once shared. Here is the wound that the highlight reels will never show you. Cristiano has said, with a heartbreak you can hear in his voice, that he never truly got to know his own father, that his dad was drunk through so much of it, that his father never really told him what he thought, never sat him down sober and proud, and said the things a son needs to hear. He has spoken of wanting to ask his father 1,000 questions and knowing he never can. He has even said he would give up some of his fame, some of his fortune, just to have had his father there sober, present, watching for one more season. The richest, most decorated footballer in history, willing to trade his crown for a conversation he will never get to have. This is the hidden engine inside the machine. The obsessive discipline, the refusal to drink, the body treated like a temple, so much of it traces back to a boy who watched what alcohol did to the man he loved most and silently swore it would never, ever take him to. Somewhere along the way, the world stopped seeing the boy and started seeing the machine. The perfect body, the impossible numbers, the celebrations that looked like arrogance. We decided he was a robot, cold, vain, manufactured. We mocked the way he looked at himself, never asking why a boy who was once told he wasn't good enough might need so badly to prove that he was. But look closer at the machine, and you find a man making choices almost no one talks about. He has no tattoos, not because he dislikes them, but because he regularly donates blood and bone marrow, and tattoos would force him to wait between donations. He chose saving strangers over decorating his own skin, and he never once turned it into a headline. There are the hospital bills he has quietly paid for sick children, the young fan with cancer he stayed in contact with, the disaster funds he gave to without a camera in sight. For every story the public knows, there are others he made sure no one would ever connect to his name. The vain superstar the internet built has, again and again, done the kind of good that vain men never bother to do in private. The discipline we mistake for ego is something far lonelier. He trains when no one is watching. He sleeps in calculated cycles. He eats the same disciplined food while the world parties around him. He once said that the hardest part of his career was not the matches, it was the sacrifice. The dinners he skipped, the nights he stayed home, the life he never lived because he was too busy building this one. We built the machine because it was easier than seeing the man. A machine has no feelings to hurt. A machine can be booed, mocked, doubted, and you never have to feel guilty. But the boy from Madeira was always still in there, doing the only thing he ever learned how to do, paying the rent on his dream every single day in full. There is a strange truth about reaching the very top. The higher he climbed, the fewer people could climb with him. Fame this enormous is not company, it is isolation with a crowd watching. Millions chant your name, and somehow you have never felt more alone. For 2 decades he was measured not as a man, but against another man. Every goal he scored was weighed against a rival on the other side of the rivalry. Whatever he achieved, half the world insisted it wasn't enough, that he was second best, that his greatness was somehow less real because someone else existed. Imagine being one of the 2 greatest to ever play, and still being told constantly that you are the lesser one. He carried his family on his back the entire way, his mother, his children, his siblings. The boy who was sent away alone became the man everyone depended on. And when his mother suffered a stroke, the strongest man in football was suddenly, publicly, a terrified son again, posting a single line begging for her to stay. The mask slipped, and underneath was just a child who did not want to lose his mom. He has talked about the pressure of always having to be the best, the exhausting, unending demand to prove himself again tomorrow, and the day after, forever. Most people get to be ordinary. He never has. From 11 years old, he has had to be extraordinary on command in front of the world, with nowhere to hide and no day off from being Cristiano Ronaldo. That is the cost no trophy can pay back. The loneliness of being a story everyone thinks they own, while almost no one knows the person inside it. So here is the truth, the one buried beneath the memes, the records, the noise. Cristiano Ronaldo is not the most talented footballer who ever lived. He has said so himself. He was not the boy blessed with effortless genius. He was the boy who was sent away, mocked, opened up on an operating table, and left to grieve a father he never got to know. He was the one who took everything the world threw at him and refused stubbornly, relentlessly, almost inhumanly to break. Everything we mistake for arrogance is the armor of a frightened child who decided that good enough was not enough. Everything we mistake for vanity is the discipline of a boy who watched a man he loved disappear and swore he never would. The greatness was never a gift. It was built brick by brick, sprint by sprint, sacrifice by sacrifice, by someone who simply would not quit. That is why he matters. Not because he is perfect, he isn't, but because his story is secretly the most human one in all of sport. It is the story of every person who was ever told they weren't enough, who paid a price no one saw, who kept going long after it stopped being fair. The next time you see him chest puffed out, arms wide, soaking in the roar of a stadium, remember the crying boy on the payphone. Remember the heart they had to burn to save. Remember the father who never got to say he was proud. And understand that the celebration was never arrogance at all. It was a boy from a tin-roofed house, finally, after everything, allowing himself one moment to believe that maybe, just maybe, he was good enough after all. And that is the truth about Cristiano Ronaldo that nobody talks about.